On today's show, can the Dallas Mavericks take advantage of the Bucks and Hawks that are now eliminated and find their center? We'll talk about that and more on today's Locked On Mavs.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks podcast.
Mavericks, NBA champions. Bang! It's good, and the Mavericks have won the game.
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
Loyalty never fades away.
And welcome. You are locked on to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and NBA channel manager for the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for being part of the show. Make it Locked On Mavs your first listen every day. Subscribe or follow for free wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. But the best way you can help us grow the show is to listen every day and to comment anything below. Let us know in the comment section below, who should the Mavericks target in a trade this offseason? Name one player. Just give us one player. Could be one of the players on the teams we're talking about today. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com. If you want to support the show, you want to go further in your Raccoon Squad devotion, help us out, keep us 5 days a week throughout the offseason. Text us, get text alerts from us, subscribe to our subtext, click the link in the description below, or text the number on the screen, or text the number in the description as well. And we appreciate each and every one of you supporting and joining me. As always, my co-host, writer, contributor at Mavs.com. The eliminated Elon, the One More Thing King. What you got for me, Isaac Harris?
Don't call me Elon. I just responded to some text on subtext there. I want to give a shout out to Brian Olson, who Brian listens to our show every single day. Talked to him this morning, and I want to give a shout out to Brian. But speaking of players that you'd love to have on the Mavericks, Steph Curry would be nice. What an all-time performance from Steph.
Goodness.
What a fun game 7. Sign me up for all game 7s that the Mavericks are not playing in. So like I can just watch.
Oh yeah. Well, the last game 7 the Mavs did play in was incredible. So I'd sign me up for that one.
Yeah, that was awesome.
That one was the best of both worlds because it's your team's in it, and also it was over from the start. So you're like, okay, I already know how this is going to end because it was the Mavs are up by on the Suns. Like,
is there any part of you that's like halfway scared that's going to be like your the peak Mavs fandom?
We're not on today's show. We're going to talk about the Bucks and the Hawks, two teams that have been eliminated from the playoffs that could go in different directions. We've been doing this every Monday where we go through teams that have been eliminated. We'll do a couple tomorrow as well and see if the Mavericks can take advantage of some of these teams that may want to go in a different direction. You think about where the Bucks are and you think about where the Hawks are, and could they want to take a different direction? Can the Mavericks take advantage of that and all that? And then later on the show, we'll talk about the coaching news. Mark Stein had a report that the Mavs are looking to add a new coach, an experienced coach on the bench after Greg St. Jean's departure. And so we'll talk about some of the candidates for that, what they bring and all that kind of stuff. But let's start here. Milwaukee Bucks get eliminated. Number 1 seed in the entire NBA, and they're gone in the first round, which is wild. Giannis played in just, 2 games? They lost both those games.
And the post-game quote that gave talk shows content for a week for some reason.
I think that's fine for him. That's fine for him as a mindset, but that's not how people are going to view their team at all. Like it was a failure, right? The same way the Mavericks season was a failure. Jason Kidd can say, hey, we did all this stuff throughout the season, and we're not going to look at it as a failure until we miss the playoffs. That's what he said during the season, and then they did miss the playoffs. And you're like, okay, well then I guess now they're concerned. Now they consider it a failure. You can try and look at it as different ways that you can, but it was a failure. And so now with the Bucks having this failure of a season, we are starting to look at what they could do in the offseason and what moves they'll make and what big moves they'll make. The one that everybody's talking about is Coach Bud. And that is a move that may be made. We'll see what happens with that. But we're going to spend some more time, I think, talking about the players. To me, I look at this team. They have $158 million in salary cap next year. The cap is what, 134?
Yeah.
And that's not even include that 158 number is not even including Brook Lopez, Jay Crowder, who they traded 5 second-round picks for and didn't play barely at all in that series, which was wild. Javon Carter has a $2.3 million player option. He just played pretty well, so he may be wanting to cash in on that. And Khris Middleton has a $40 million player option. That counts in that 158 number that I mentioned, but we have to talk about it because he could turn that down and want a bigger deal or something like that, which could affect them. And so they'll bring this up because I've been talking about all these teams because there's a new CBA coming. There's a new collective bargaining agreement where these teams that are going to be in the second luxury tax level, the second apron, as they call it, if you're in that for 2 years in a row, you're just in absolute hell when it comes to draft picks and trades and exceptions and all that kind of stuff. Like, you're just restricted in so many ways that I think some of these teams will want to save some money, especially if they have a disappointing season like this. So the Bucks could be looking to make some moves to avoid that next year, to not do it 2 years in a row if they keep some of these guys. But when you first look at the Bucks, Isaac, what's the first thing you look at from a Mavs point of view?
Can we do a coach trade? No, just kidding. I look at it from.
Would you do it?
No, I can't think about that right now. Let me talk about the players.
That's a lot. I'm curious what people say in the comment section. That's an interesting question.
They got to figure out what's going to happen with Khris Middleton. What is changing out Bud the only thing that they're looking to change this summer? Because on a bigger scale, kind of in the same ballpark as, Mavericks had expectations, not as high as the Bucks. They had expectations. It was a disaster. The Bucks had expectations going into the playoffs. It was a disaster in the first round. Like, you were the odds on favorite to win the title. You lose in the first round. Yeah. There's a whole other, there's a lot of reasons, Giannis health, all that stuff. But still, it's like, if you change out Bud, do you just roll the same roster back? So that's why I go back to Khris Middleton and say, like, you look at their big three. Giannis under contract for a while. Jrue Holiday has one more year next year, like that 36, 37 million, mark. Then he has a player option after that. But Khris Middleton this summer, do they just re-up him, give him a massive contract and say, hey, we're just going to run this, this big three back, try to bring back some pieces, maybe add some other pieces around the edges and say, hey, we've been a really good team before. It was just Giannis's health. Or do they entertain swapping Khris Middleton out for better pieces? Or I say better pieces, like multiple. I shouldn't say better pieces because Khris Middleton's gonna be the better player. Do they look at swapping Middleton out for
depth?
for depth? And that's where, if you're Dallas, like, I would be really interested in Khris Middleton, both as like a sign and trade, possibility, and also if Kyrie walks, as like one of the free agent, chases that I would make too, because I expect him to opt out. Whether he's going to go back to Milwaukee in a massive deal or not, he's probably going to opt out. And I just think he would be a good fit next to Luka.
I think he would. I wouldn't put it super high on my list if you're looking after Khris Middleton. I think that he's making $40 million this year. And that's a lot for his type of player. He's made the All-Star team 3 times. He's never scored more than 20 points a game in a regular season. Like, he's played next to Giannis his whole career, besides that first year in Detroit. And he's been there. He's been the second fiddle, so he knows how to play that role. But I don't know if that's changing a lot for me. If you're going from Kyrie to all of a sudden, 31-year-old Khris Middleton, if you're feeling great about it, like, oh, the Mavericks got so much better. It is something to watch, but that's not a target where I go, man, I'm so pumped up about that move if that happens.
Would you do Tim, Reggie, Maxey in the 10th pick for Middleton?
In the idea that they're keeping Kyrie?
Yep. How far does a Luka, Kyrie, Middleton trio, big three, get you?
I think that trio does really well. I still think you're struggling defensively, and then your depth is just toast. You have 3 players on the roster, and that's kind of it.
Let me ask you this. If you land in the top 4, you land pick 3 or pick 4, would you trade it for Jrue Holiday?
The player, yes. Like you think now, top 4. I don't know. I don't think so. He's okay. He's 30. He's going to be 33 this summer.
I'm not doing it for 1 or 2. Probably not doing it for 3. But if I landed at 4, I'm thinking about it.
You got to give me. I think you got to give me a little bit more than just Jrue Holiday himself.
Okay.
But you're talking about the perfect player to play next to
Jrue,
Luka.
Kyrie, and Luka.
That's an incredible backcourt. Like you're beating teams just on your backcourt. But coming up, let's talk about we'll talk about some of the Atlanta ones. We'll talk a little bit more about the Bucks because I want to talk about Brook Lopez and see if that's an option. He's an actual free agent this offseason. But coming up, we'll talk about Atlanta and all their options as well. But before we do, let me tell you about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. You can go check out and see what's available on Prize Picks and go see what you can get. There's all kinds of different odds and things that you can put some money down on. Like, for example, Celtics versus Sixers. No Joel Embiid. Jason Tatum, 28.5 points, more or less in that game.
Less.
I think, yeah, I'm going less because I don't think he's going to have to. James Harden, 22.5 points, more or less. Give me the more on that one. For sure. Give me more on that one for sure. Tyrese Maxey, 24.5.
Whoa.
That's a little high for me. I was interested in that one.
I'll go more.
Oh, Tobias Harris, 16.5.
No.
That seems low, but you can go less on that one if you want to. Put down $20. If I put all four of those down, put down $20, I can win $100. If I decide to put down $100, I can win $500 just in that one play. It's fun. Check it out. Use the promo code Locked On to get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. Go check it out. Download the app or go to prizepicks.com. All right, Isaac Harris, thanks everybody for hanging out with us on Locked On Mavs, being part of the show. Tomorrow's show, we're going to get into how the Mavs can benefit from the Kings, Grizzlies, and Clippers playoff exit. So if you're interested in these kind of discussions, come back tomorrow. And we are 5 days a week all throughout the offseason. So we appreciate each and every one of you guys. Let's keep talking about the Bucks. So we're talking about Khris Middleton as a potential option. One of the other unrestricted free agents I'm really interested in, and I don't know if the Mavericks have ever been connected to this player before, but Goran Dragic is an unrestricted free agent from the
I was honestly following you really good. I was like, oh, he's kind of setting up Brook Lopez.
Got him
pretty good here.
Got him, guys. I got him. I got him so hard.
You did.
That's one. Okay, that's one you have to go watch the YouTube for, just to see Isaac, Isaac's face slowly deflate.
No, but honestly, I was sitting there racking my brain. I'm like, has anybody written about Brook Lopez Mavs? Like when you were saying that, and I couldn't think of somebody.
But Brook Lopez, he's not signed next year. He's an unrestricted free agent. He is, the type of center the Mavericks desperately need. He doesn't rebound that well, but he does affect rebounding. There have been studies and things on that in the past on how he rebounding. He can score himself, which is super helpful. He's just and obviously he can shoot the three, so he spaces the floor. He defends the rim at an elite level, spaces the floor at an elite level. Like that's just such a center that the Mavericks need. Now he is 35. He just turned 35 in April, but he's a free agent this offseason. What's your thoughts on Brook Lopez to the Mavericks in some way, shape, or form?
I forgot he was 35.
Yeah,
that's scary for a guy his size. I'm interested for a cheap price, but
the problem is what the Mavericks have as a cheap price is like whatever the exception they're going to have this offseason.
There's a world they could get the full MLE.
They get the full MLE. They sign him for that, and then you're okay with that because I don't know.
He's better than JaVale.
He's great. He's great. If you sign him for the MLE for the Mavericks, you're feeling incredible about that because it would only be 1 year. Like you can't sign MLE for multiple years like that. So he made $13 million this past year. So that's not too far off what he was making this past year. But he was second runner-up in Defensive Player of the Year. So I don't know if he's more valuable or not. But that's one you're feeling really, really good about if you're the Mavericks, if you can get Brook Lopez. If Brook Lopez, and he has connections to Jason Kidd, we should point that out because he was there in LA. I'm pretty sure that one of the years with Jason Kidd.
Don't remember that. Anyway, yes, I'd be interested in Brook Lopez. I have a million Hawks thoughts and trades to go.
He was not there. He was not there the 1 year that Brook Lopez was in LA, but he was not there.
All right, so let's transition to the Hawks because I want to say this right off the top. Every time I look at the Hawks roster, I'm like, how are they not better than what they are?
Yes.
It makes zero sense to me. And I can't help to look at it and say, if Luka had this roster, they'd be in the finals.
I've said this several different ways, is that the Hawks did everything Mavericks fans have asked the Mavs to do around Trae Young. The Hawks did. They drafted well. They hit on some draft picks. They had some higher picks that they were able to use. They
had some more shots at it though.
But they got a John Collins with like a later pick. They got a.
They can't give him away.
But they signed him to that. I mean, he produces he produces some things. They went and they signed guys in the offseason, and now
they had Cam Reddish.
Now they're trying to they did have Cam Reddish, which is something. They went and traded for a backcourt mate for him, like another young all-star.
Yeah.
They have a center. They drafted another center. Like Okongwu was one they hit on that he wasn't.
Yeah, he's good.
He was the sixth pick. Good Lord. This is the other thing, is they've had some high picks with Trae Young. And that's the difference between the Mavs and the Hawks, really. It's a couple of wins in free agency and some things, and then their higher picks. But when you look at the Hawks, this is a team I talked about on Friday a lot. Is I was looking at teams that could do a Lakers type trade, so like a 2-for-1 or a 3-for-1, where the Mavericks just send salary to help that team clear up some space, and the Mavericks send a pick, and then that works for that Hawks team or whatever team receiving, because they want to go a different direction. I'm not sure what the Hawks want to do. I don't know what Quinn Snyder wants to do with them. I'm sure they don't want to do what the Jazz did and just tear it all down like they did this past year. But when you're looking at the Hawks, what stands out to you?
Well, it's even more than Quinn Snyder, because they got new GM in place, or at least giving Landry Fields more responsibility in it. And it's like you start looking at the roster. One, I do think they entertain Trae Young trade. So if they do,
there's already been rumors about that.
Yeah, if they do trade Trae Young, then there's no telling what direction the franchise goes, right? And then you're looking at the future, DeJounte Murray and all that stuff. Let's just, for the sake of this, assume that they're keeping Trae. They're going to re-sign DeJounte to a long-term deal, because you don't make that trade without doing that. It's everybody else on the roster that I'm like, dude, they could trade any of these guys. Because there's the young guys like Okongwu, AJ Griffin, Sadiq Bey that they got in a trade, Jalen Johnson. Like, those four guys are in the rotation playing. Don't see them really trading them, but it's the other four guys that you're like, hey, I would be keeping, the number in my phone for the moving company. DeAndre Hunter, Clint Capela, John Collins, Bogdan Bogdanovic. Those four guys, any combination of those guys could be out of Atlanta. And there's a world, they also have pick 15 too in the draft. There's so many different iterations of trades for Dallas that I would say, yeah. I mean, DeAndre Hunter's the first name that comes to my mind with it. He's under contract for 4 more years after this one. And I just think he would be an awesome fit in Dallas.
Yeah, you look at the Hawks and you think, okay, $170 million on the books next year. that is a lot. And they basically have everybody signed. The only guys that are not signed are like Trent Forrest. You remember Trent Forrest? Aaron Holiday.
The wave.
Aaron Holiday.
Well, they just gave Bogdan the extension. And I don't know. It feels like some people I talked to are like, yeah, they just gave him that extension so they could trade him. And I was like, okay, well.
So there's that, but 170 million is a ton. I mean, you're way into the luxury tax. Then with this new CBA coming up that I talked about earlier, they have $146 million in cap next year without DeJounte Murray. So they have to make some decisions, and one of those decisions could be Clint Capela. It's one of the ones the Mavericks should absolutely look at, and I think is, to me, if I'm just looking at options, maybe the most likely, because they have cause to move in with the money, and they have a replacement with Okongwu, who's already there, who's doing well. And Clint Capela was great in their play-in and all that kind of stuff. One of the reasons why they made it through the play-in, but they have somebody to replace him who's younger and is going to have his own deal coming up. Okongwu is a restricted free agent, not this offseason, but next offseason. So that's huge for them. So are they going to sign him as a restricted free agent and then keep Capela at $22.7 million? I don't know about that. So that's what I'm really looking at, because I think that's the easiest way for the Mavericks to fix what's going on, is if they could do some kind of salaries plus a pick plus, whatever for Clint Capela. I had a couple of trades.
I was just say, yeah, I got some too.
Coming up. Let me give you some of the trades that I did on Friday. You give me some of the trades that you have, and we'll talk about those coming up.
I love trades.
All right, Isaac, thanks everybody for hanging out with us, joining the Raccoon Squad. If you listen 5 days a week, we appreciate you guys. Tomorrow's show, we'll talk about if the Mavericks can benefit from the Kings, Grizzlies, and Clippers playoff exits. Lots of players to talk about with them. Lots of different things. The Clippers could go in any different directions with players. They've got a bunch of guys. We'll talk about that tomorrow. We've got a couple of trades. We've been talking about the Atlanta Hawks. They have this huge amount of salaries, and they got to make some kind of moves because I don't think they're good enough for $170 million payroll next year. Not even considering what their 2-year like repeater tax thing could be. And so Clint Capela, DeAndre Hunter are the two players that stand out to me the most. What kind of trades did you put together?
Yeah, I had some centered around Capela, John Collins, Bogdan. Like the thing with Dallas you got to look at is saying, all right, what expiring contracts do they have starting, going into next year? You look at, and the big thing for them is the guaranteed money for Bertans and Reggie Bullock, to where, they got to make a decision basically by the end of June on Bullock, to where, they keep him on the roster. He's basically going to be a $10 million expiring contract next year. I expect him to be on the roster.
Me too.
Then with Bertans, he has this deal, at that 17 mark, but there's a certain percentage of his games that if he doesn't hit that, then he's only like $5 million guaranteed for the next season. So kind of like a semi-expiring deal in a way. So if Atlanta's looking at some of their contracts, new front office, new head coach, and let's just say, I mean, this even goes with like if they trade Trae Young and they want to go backwards a little bit, and they're like, can we get off some long-term money?
Yeah.
And look at the contracts of Reggie Bullock, Davis Bertans, and let's say if you want to make it even bigger, you could include Tim Hardaway, the 10th overall pick in that. And that's where you can look into and say, all right, could you include all four of those for DeAndre Hunter and Clint Capela? If the Hawks wanted to look at, and like with the 10th pick, it's Tim, Bertans, Reggie, and the 10th pick for DeAndre Hunter and Clint Capela. Could you do all four of those, Tim, Bertans, Reggie, and 10 for Bogdan, Capela, and 15? So you're swapping out Bogdan for Tim.
No.
Shorter. What?
I don't think that one to me, if they're just flipping picks, I don't think so. You got to give some value to
the thing about it is you're getting off the long-term money of Bogdan. Yeah. Like if you're wanting to shed, some money, and then Capela, you're, moving up 10 spots, all of that. And then like, how desperate are they to move John Collins? And if you're Dallas, okay, let me ask you this. If you're Dallas, would you trade Bertans, JaVale, and 10 for John Collins?
No.
Okay.
Not at all. No. John Collins is in a similar situation as Christian Wood was, right? Like there's
I don't know, man. He's better than Christian Wood. Here's what I think. I am not the John Collins. Like
correct.
I'm not
correct. He's making more than him though. He's making 25 next year, 26 the year after that, and 26 the year after that. So yes, he is a better player than Christian Wood, sure, but he's making so much more. And yes, we know that they've been shopping him for like 2-3 years now. Right? Yeah. Like they've been chopping him for a while and haven't been able to move him. So that's why I say he's in the same boat as Christian Wood, is that their teams tried to shop him. You can't move him because it's a hard player to try and fit next to somebody, because you have to have somebody that defends the rim, and you have to have a playmaker to set him up. Like it's a weird fit for him somewhere in the NBA.
I get it. Yeah. Anyway.
So no, and the Mavericks just tried that type of player with Christian Wood, and
I get it. Okay.
In a bad way.
I'm not the biggest John Collins fan, so I'm agreeing with everything.
You're defending him though, so it sounds like you are.
I was defending him a little bit because I do feel like the pendulum swung a little too far. I still think he is a talented player in a vacuum, but yeah,
sure, but in his vacuum is making $25 million next year.
In his bag,
in his vacuum bag.
I would love, in a perfect world though, I would love for them to entertain, if they could, pull off some type of deal with the 10th pick salaries for DeAndre Hunter. That would be ideal for me.
That one's great. He's making 20 million, 21, 23, 25 the next 4 years, all guaranteed. And so that's like a way that they can move off of some salary. You mentioned Bogdanovich, another one. Those are big. Could they do some kind of, instead of DeAndre Hunter, this is the one that probably will happen, is a Collins Capela for Tim, Davis, maybe either JaVale or Reggie, like to make the rest of the salaries work, and a first. Would you do that? Because then you're taking
first, no.
Because then you're taking some of you're taking their salary back, and they're air quotes dead weight with John Collins and Capela. So you move all that, they become a different team, which I wonder, part of this is what does Quinn Snyder want them to be? Like, can he see, all right, we can just play Hunter at 4. We can do some of what we did in Utah but make it mobile with a Kongwu at center. Have these bigs and be more of a mobile moving team instead of like a plotting center in Capela and John Collins as like a traditional 4 and all that kind of stuff.
I got one for you. If they trade Trae and they really just blow it up this summer, and the Mavericks landed at 3 or 4 in the draft, would you trade that for DeJounte?
3 or 4, the third or fourth pick in the draft for DeJounte Murray. He $18 million expiring next year. So you're doing a Kyrie thing again, but he's 27, which is older than you think he is. He was in San Antonio for a while. So he's coming up on a deal. I don't know if I want to pay DeJounte the type of money he wants to make.
I know.
Because yes, you do it straight. I think I would do it straight up. Like the 4th pick for him, 4th pick, what percentage of the time becomes an all-star type player? And he is an all-star.
And him with
player.
Kyrie and Luka would be fun. Although he's not the best 3-point shooter, but
he's also an interesting personality that had some weird things in San Antonio and all kinds of things. So who knows what the mix of like Kyrie and DeJounte could prove. But yeah, that's an interesting one. So that's the Bucks. That's the Hawks. Let us know in the comment section who you would want to trade for. What trade target would you want to? Let's talk about some of this news recently. Mark Stein had a report in his great newsletter. It's a must subscribe for all Mavericks fans. You'll get this stuff in your inbox. We highly recommend it. Former head coaches James Borrego and Jeff Hornacek are among the expected top targets for the opening Dallas has created in its bench to bolster Jason Kidd's coaching staff. He also mentioned that Frank Vogel is currently focused on a return as a head coach. So doesn't seem like he's going to be somebody that the Mavericks will get to talk to about this position, or they have already and they've heard back from him that he's like, hey, I want to be a head coach for the Bucks and not assistant coach for the Mavericks. He also mentioned Terry Stotts could emerge as a Mavericks candidate. Thoughts? I got just written down some of the stuff about Borrego and Hornacek. Borrego has been a coach in the NBA for 13 years. He was an assistant for the New Orleans Hornets back in like 2010. Magic, where he was the interim head coach in 2014, and then the Spurs, he was an assistant for 3 years. So the pop tree and all that stuff that people have talked about. He was a head coach for the Charlotte Hornets for a couple of years there, including 2022, where they lost to the Hawks in the play-in pretty badly, and that was the end of that for him. It seemed like he always got pretty good reception and did pretty well with that group, considering how they did this year. Hornacek has been in coaching for 13 years, obviously a player for a long time in the NBA, assistant coach for the Jazz, and then most recently the Rockets from 2020 to this most recent season with Steven Silas. Hornacek was a head coach for the Suns for 3 seasons in 2013 to 16. That was that Dragic, Bledsoe team that won 48 games the year after they won 25. Like they overachieved like crazy that season. He was the head coach of that team. He was also the head coach of the Knicks for 2 years, and they were not good. And then he got fired, as all Knicks coaches end up doing. Terry Stotts, we've mentioned him a lot. He's been in coaching for 27 years. He's been around for a long time. He was an assistant for the Seattle Supersonics like back then. The Bucks, the Warriors. He was an assistant on the Mavericks team that won in 2011 with Rick Carlisle. Jason Kidd was on that team, obviously, so he's got a connection there. He played for Terry Stotts. And Terry Stotts was most recently a head coach for the Blazers back in 2021. So he hasn't been in coaching for a couple of years. So those are the options they're looking at. He also mentioned that Paul Silas is looking to be part of. I thought about that twice when I said his name earlier. Steven Silas is thought to be joining Boston's bench to be an assistant there for them. But of these assistant coaches, who are you looking at? And who do you want to bring the Mavericks to replace Greg St. Jean?
Yeah, I'd still want Frank Vogel if it was possible, but Stein said that he's looking at head coaching spots, that he interviewed for that Houston spot.
Yeah,
that Udoka ended up getting. Man, it would be nice to bring Vogel in, but yeah, I mean, outside of that, the nostalgia, says Terry Stotts. He does love Katie Trell. Ran into him coming off Katy Trail when Portland was in town one time, and he's like, man, every time I come back to Dallas, I gotta hit up Katy Trail because I love Dallas, and so it'd be cool, a ton of experience. Like it all makes sense if you bring in like a Terry Stotts, and it's like, man, all the connections, exactly the type of guy you want next to Kid. But I'm not opposed to the other guy. I think I'd probably lean Borrego over. I didn't understand the Borrego firing as much in Charlotte.
Yeah, same.
After making the play, I was like, oh, cool. You made it like a first step, and then he was just out. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and like want to go off in Victory Park if they hire, Hornacek.
Terry Stotts brings the most experience. He's obviously been with the Mavericks before. He's been, an assistant coach for a title team. He coached the Blazers team that was in the playoffs. So if you're looking for somebody with the most experience to join the staff, which is what they set out to do, basically, I think you go with Terry Stotts if he is interested in that. If I'm just going with a coach, I think I would go with Borrego too. I like the way that he handled young players and all that kind of stuff for the Hornets. So I'm looking at that. And maybe if you're looking for somebody that, okay, if Jason Kidd's not the head coach and you want to move on from somebody, I would feel better about Borrego than some of these other names.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like the pop coaching tree. That's one. Second, it's like I don't have his head coaching stuff in front of me, but
just with the Hornets.
Yeah, his only head coaching stop so far has been that Hornets run there that I wouldn't say it had the best of rosters in the world, but they at least made a play in, and then he was kind of out. So,
well, in his last 3 years, they won 23 games, 33 games, and 43 games, and then they lost in the play-in really badly, and then they moved on from him, and they went back to Steve Clifford. Back, where did it lead you? Back to me.
I want to say that we've seen him at practice. I could be wrong. Yeah, could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he's been at a practice or two for Dallas. But
Mavericks have brought in there's been a bunch of coaches that walk through practice, and and just every once in a while, like Frank Vogel was there this year. Like you just see some of these coaches, and it just happens. It's not like there's no really like rumor or anything behind it. They're just there to visit and see.
Miles Turner practicing
yeah. So there you go. Let us know in the comment section who would you want as an assistant coach. They're just trying to bring some experience to the staff, which I think is the right move. So I'm glad that they're doing this. Glad that they did it in the front office with Dennis Lindsay and all that kind of stuff, guys. Tomorrow, again, we'll be back talking about the other exits from the other teams. The Kings lost in 7. The Grizzlies lost in dramatic fashion, as they do everything. And the Clippers, what are they going to do? Can the Mavericks take advantage of it? Talk about all those tomorrow. Guys, thanks so much for listening to Locked On Mavs.
Peace out.
Boom.